So the first thing to say is that this is a really important societal issue, and as such, I think we're going to have a lot of focus today in today's class on the discussion of this topic. And the good thing about there only be, you know, three of you in this class today is that you guys would have more opportunities to kind of give your opinion and your analysis on each of the topics that we're discussing. So, a few things under crime and punishment. Actually, before we get into this, let's just quickly check what we know. So, when I say the words crime and punishment, what does that bring to your mind? Like, what do you associate those words with? Someone want to share? Sure, Catherine.
Um, so for crime, I think of like robbing and like murder. And for punishment, it's like to, for example, like jail or death row or something.
Okay, for sure. So, crime are generally things, bad actions that are done against society. So, it can be things like theft or murder. And then punishment is the way in which we kind of get justice for criminals, people who have committed those crimes against other people in society, right? That's the point of punishment. Kiwi, would you like to add to that?
Like the justice system.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to expand a bit on what do you know about the justice system? Like, how does it work in your opinion?
Um, like court rulings and laws and stuff.
For sure, right? Court rulings, laws, and things like that. These are all really crucial parts of the justice system. We're going to also find that it's a lot more comprehensive than just that. In fact, there are a lot of different systems and institutions, which is just a fancy way of saying like organizations in society that serve a specific purpose that operate and allow our criminal justice system to kind of function so effectively, or maybe not effectively, depending on your views on the Canadian criminal justice system. Good. Okay. Lucas, do you have anything to add to that? I know say you haven't volunteered yet.
Um, I guess, um, not really.
Okay. Well, what about you give me some examples of what you know, what you've heard of crime or punishment?
Like crime is like stealing things, doing things against the law, and punishment is like, a way of keeping crime at a lower rate.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I really like that last part you said there. Like the purpose of punishment, which is one of the purposes of punishment is known as deterrence, which is like you say, we want to discourage people from committing crimes by threatening them with here are the potential punishments, here's what's going to happen to you if you do decide to do something bad, right? So that's really good. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. Well, I kind of already hinted at this with what we just discussed, the purpose of punishment. What types of punishment are there? Is punishment actually effective? And what sorts of other ways can we look at to changing our justice system so that it's not solely focused on punishment, right? Because, and this is a really interesting issue, I think, in today's society, especially as we're becoming more liberal, we're becoming more progressive, and we're starting to realize that maybe the criminal justice system, the ways in which we've looked at crime and punishment in the past, maybe it's not the most effective way to tackling today's problems in regards to crime. Okay, let's begin with just a brief discussion of the law and why laws are important. Anyone want to try to give to me a definition? What do they think the word laws entails? Sorry, is someone speaking? Oh, okay, they just left. Right, Bessie, what do you think? How about you give us your interpretation?
Just like a bunch of rules that you should abide by because otherwise, uh, police will arrest you and stuff.
Okay, I think it was a bit hard to hear you. I think your microphone might there might be some issues with it, so just try to like make sure that you're speaking into your microphone or that it is like not too low of a volume. But I think I generally understand what you're saying there, right? In the sets of rules that everyone in society agrees to abide by, right? And these rules are generally there, they're created there for a reason. Why do we think laws are important? Why do we think it's so important to have this set of common rules that every citizen in a society agrees to follow and abide by? Anyone? Okay, what about Catherine? What do you think?
I think the law is like a set of rules for like a whole city or a country to follow. For example, like for example, there can't be like roadkill or something in a certain country.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a, that's good definition. Why are laws important? This is like the second more important question I want us to think about. Okay, Evie, want to answer?
Because laws keep people from doing bad things and they like provide an incentive for people to not do them.
Yeah. Laws in themselves are not the only incentive, are not a sufficient incentive to get people to not do bad things, to break rules, right? You need to back up your laws with actual punishments that can be enforced, right? So if I just tell you, oh, don't do this, it's against the law, right? You are only likely to listen to me if you know, like, maybe the police will come and arrest you if you actually break the law, right? If no one actually comes to you and punishes you, then the law itself, just on its own, is nothing, right? This is an important thing I want us to understand. So I have two more questions for you guys, and then maybe we can have a discussion, like a short debate on this. But who decides the laws and who enforces them? So let's start with the first question. Who do you think in our society decides the laws? Who's the one who's setting the rules for us to follow? Okay, Lucas, what do you think?
The government and the like police force enforces the laws.
Okay, who in particular in the government do you think sets the laws?
Um, Probably the actually I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So, if you think back to your social studies class or your civics class, I don't know if you guys taken it, but there are three branches of government, right? There's the executive branch, there's the legislative branch, and there's the judiciary branch, right? So generally, the legislative branch is the one who actually sets the laws, right? They're the ones who come up with bills, proposals to change and amend laws, for example, and then they get voted in or they get rejected. Um, the judiciary branch is the one that is responsible for interpreting laws, and that kind of like goes into the enforcement of the laws, right? But generally, yeah, I would say like police, in exceptional cases, the military of a government is the one enforcing those laws, right? The way you enforce the laws is you need some sort of physical threat or violence to be able to get people, to be able to enforce the laws, which is why we say that the police are able to have things like weapons, like guns, like tasers, but regular citizens, unless you're in America, generally don't, right? Because we recognize we need some powerful institution, we need some powerful group to have all the means to threaten us if we don't follow the laws. And so in this case, we trust the police in our society to do this job. Okay, does that explanation kind of make sense to you guys? Okay, let's assume yes. Good. Okay, a bit about courts. So courts are kind of the second step in the criminal justice system after the police, right? After the police have, you know, they arrest you for breaking the law, you go to court where they actually determine your guilt or your innocence in actually whether you've broken the law or not. And courts kind of operate on a hierarchy, right? So there are different tiers to the courts. There's the lowest tier, which are for the smallest offenses. So you could go to like provincial court if you do something like you go through a red light or something, or like you steal some money, right? And then the way the hierarchy works is if you feel like the court's decision is wrong, you can appeal the decision and move it up to a higher level. So you can go all the way from provincial courts to superior courts, then to the Supreme Court of Canada, which is reserved for the most important cases. Okay. Um, I guess we have a lot to cover, so let's also just jump right into discussing laws. What are some examples of laws that you know of in society, in Canada, for example, or in other parts of the world? Anyone want to give this a try? Just give me one example, even. Anyone? Let's hear from, let's have each of you think of one law. You guys can all think of one. I think we'll have four. So let's start with Catherine. Can you think of one example of a law in society?
Um, I can't really think of one.
No,
Maybe,
no.
for example, like you can't murder or something.
Yeah, laws against murder for sure. That's a good
And
one.
so if like the law is like if you speed, you have to get like a speeding ticket with a fine or something.
Yeah, so laws against speeding, it's traffic law for sure. Very good. Bessie, what do you have?
You're not allowed to neglect your children.
Laws against child neglect. Really good. Yeah, that's actually quite a good one. I haven't heard that one in that commonly. Hebe, what do you think?
Like food safety laws for restaurants.
Yeah, absolutely. Great one. So we're looking at more local laws, kind of, but these are important laws, right? I like how you guys are thinking of laws that aren't just like directly like laws involving physical force or violence against someone, right? But these are important laws in society as well. Who else are we missing? Did everyone go, or did someone still not go yet? I think we're missing someone. Okay, I can't remember if I gone through everyone, but good examples. Um, so some of the laws you guys gave as examples would go under civil law, right? They're to settle things like disputes on property, relationships, or business. Then there's also criminal law, this second subset of law, which deals with protection, right? It deals with the physical security and well-being of citizens. So these types of laws are created to protect criminals from the rest of society, or sorry, protect the rest of society from criminals. Okay. But in general, laws enforce the idea of morality, right? Right? Laws set the norms to tell us what is right or wrong. Okay, so this is an important kind of distinction or an important thing you guys should know. Okay, so let's have a mini discussion about these two types of laws, because I think these are quite interesting types of laws, right? We have civil law and then we have criminal law. Which type of law do you think is more important in society? Anyone think civil law is more important? Anyone think criminal law is more important? Let's hear some thoughts. Okay, we'll start with Bessie. Bessie, what do you think?
I think both are equally important because civil laws apply in daily life, but also about criminal laws, there might be higher criminal crime rates, which is why they're needed.
Okay. Yeah, your mic is still kind of unclear. Could you maybe type your answer in chat? Just repeat it so that the rest of us can see it, and then maybe I'll follow up with that. Sorry, yeah, it's just really hard to hear through your mic. Lucas, in the meantime, why don't you give us your take on this? What do you think?
I think civil cases are more important because um if like everyone like didn't really commit too many crimes, then like there are probably a lot of like disputes on different things. So having like some kind of law in that terms is I think more important.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a totally fair idea to say that civil cases probably occur a lot more frequently. They affect a lot more parts of our lives because not everyone is going to like be affected by some kind of like physical or direct threat of violence or force. But certainly, I think on a day-to-day basis, we're going to be involved in civil law, right? Whether it's relationships, right? Like family law, divorce law, for example, business law, for example, food safety laws, for example, property laws, right? Like things like trespassing, for example, or like damages on properties. Bessie says both because civil law can be applied more in daily life, so it's good. It's kind of like echoing what Lucas said. But criminal law is important to control crime rates and stuff, right? For sure. And crime rates, maybe it's not as frequent or maybe not as, common of an issue as civil cases, but certainly they are still very important, right? They're very severe cases. Okay, let's hear from one more person. Anyone want to? How about Hebe? What do you think?
I would also say both because while civil cases may happen more often and they're more like daily life related, you could argue that criminal law does more work and protects people from more harm because the consequences of like a murder or a robbery are greater than like a divorce case or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. So the consequences are greater, right? And that's a key thing with criminal law. And this is why generally the punishments for criminal law are so higher, right? Because if we recognize, well, look, there's more at stake here, there's more to lose, we obviously want to make sure that people are even more afraid of breaking these criminal laws, right? And doing those really bad things. So really good discussion. I like how you guys have like understanding of both sides here. Let's jump into the second thing, which is causes. Why do crimes occur? So we've talked a lot about the role of the law, enforcing and creating laws, and what the laws really are. Why do people break the law, right? And I can already tell you that the answer is not going to be a very simple one word answer, right? This is a multi-factor, or this is like a very complicated issue in society, and indeed, this is why it's been so difficult to keep crime down. So I'm going to ask you guys this pretty simple, straightforward question, but why do people commit crimes? Tip, don't just think of the worst crime. Evie,
Um, I think most crimes are committed out of necessity, like stealing food or something, or like yeah, like most like stealing is because like the robbers don't have lots of money and they might need the material goods, or they could sell the material goods for money because they're poor.
exactly. So one thing definitely are people's material needs. And this is incredibly important and it affects a lot of people, right? A lot of people are in not great, poor circumstances. Um, so obviously they need that sort of money in order to survive. Sometimes, job opportunities aren't available for them. They can't access it through maybe their welfare payments are not enough. Well, what other alternatives do they have than to steal a loaf of bread from the local shop, right? Or I don't know, like just do something in order to continue trying to survive. Um, so for sure, that's one thing. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else? Who just answered? I think it was forgot already, but Bessie, what do you think?
Uh, People could be in a state of like psychosis or something.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Psychosis, like stuff.
Coach culture, you say?
I'll type it.
Okay, yeah, you can type it. And then maybe if we'll get one more person at the same time. So Lucas, what do you think?
I think some people might just commit some crimes to get like an advantage in life. For example, like tax fraud. He might just do it so he could like get a little bit more money.
Mm, yeah, exactly, right? People just want an advantage in life. Maybe some people are just motivated by greed. So yeah, for sure that's something that could motivate them. What about just let's think just even more from the perspective of an average person, right? Like why do some people commit crimes? Why do some people do really bad stuff? Psychosis and mental health issues, for sure. Yeah, like some people are just struggling from um, these sorts of things, and unfortunately, that makes them act in non-normal ways. Sometimes that can drive them to, commit crimes. Um, yeah, so that for sure. So the final thing we'll just say is like, um, sometimes generally people act on their emotions, right? Sometimes they're not thinking the most rational ways. And so, if you get angry at someone, punch them, or you even something worse, you like severely injure them, right? When you're driving on the road and the driver ahead of you is really slow and you get angry and you hit their car from behind, right? There's ways in which emotions and the ways in which we act without thinking sometimes also just causes people to commit crimes. So I think we have a really good comprehensive understanding now of the ways in which uh, yeah, of which we commit crime. So that's good. So this is what we were talking about. Okay. More important, more importantly, I want us to now discuss ways we can address these sorts of causes. Okay. And here maybe we'll also have a mini debate about what do we think is the best way to address the causes of crime, right? Let's say you're the mayor of your city and it's a really big spike in crime. Now, if you were to implement some kind of idea or policy that would address this, what would you say is the best kind of starting point? What can we do? Who is responsible to address it? Oh, I guess what can we really do, right? Anyone want to say? Evie, what do you think?
Um, the last slide said I think like 60% of crimes were like fueled by hate. So if you just like made the town more like accepting and like tolerant, like maybe by teaching kindness and stuff in schools and just making it like safer for the targets of the hate crimes, then and people like understood them more, and then they wouldn't commit the crimes.
Right. So discrimination, hate, these sorts of things could be addressed by, maybe more cultural kind of sensitivity courses or just creating a more safer and more inclusive environment. And, you know, I think that's a great point, right? Talking about hate and linking this to the social kind of effects of hate, right? It's not just me personally hating someone. There are often times in society where different groups of people hate other groups of people, unfortunately. So yeah, that's really good. What about other causes? How could we address those other causes? Anyone else want to share?
Maybe like provide resources because like I saw like 20% of crimes were committed because of poverty. Maybe some more charities.
Yeah, for sure. So how would charities kind of solve this issue?
Um, well, maybe then these people would just go to the charities to get the things they need instead of committing crimes to get it.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe, these people, like we said, they might be struggling with their current financial situation. They might need a bit of support. Maybe the government isn't doing enough. Well, charities can kind of come in here, provide much needed materials or resources for these people, and maybe that'll, help them get back into society without having to resort to more legal means, right? To kind of keep themselves alive. That's good. Anyone else want to add to this before we move on to the next section? Okay, cool. On to the third section then, which is punishment. So we've talked about the causes of crime. We've talked about how they work. Um, but now let's look at punishment and the ways in which society currently tries to address these sorts of issues, and maybe what ways society could look towards addressing these issues better. So first thing I'll probably ask you guys is, what do punishments look like for crimes? Just name some for me. Like if you break a law in society in Canada, what could possibly happen to you?
Or you could go to jail.
One thing is you go to jail, right? So the punishment, what is the purpose of jail? Like why is that a punishment?
So that you think about what you've done and hopefully you come out as a better person.
Yeah, well, that's one of the, I think, ways you could say jail is effective. The main punishment, right? The main thing that jail is kind of to punish you on is when you are in jail, you have a lot of your freedoms taken away, right? You can't go anywhere. You're stuck in this like one place with a bunch of other people you don't know. You lose a lot of your freedoms, right? So that's why people don't like jail because you can't do anything that you really want. You're kind of forced in this environment. And so that's why it's a punishment, right? Hebe, yeah, go ahead.
For I guess less serious things like speeding, there could be a fine.
Yeah, fine. So for example, it could be like you speed, you get a ticket, and the ticket orders you to pay $50 to the government, right? That's a fine. It's a monetary punishment. Um, because you are losing money, right? So it's self-explanatory. We don't want that. That's why it's a punishment. Another thing that kind of closely relates to jail, that's maybe a little less severe, right? Is for like maybe punishments that are in the middle, right? It's not as small to warrant just a fine, but it's also not something super serious, like you have to literally go to jail and be separated from your friends and your family. So it could be something like a minor like committing a crime, like they steal something, robbing something from the store or hitting someone and knocking them down, right? Well, maybe they do community service, right? They do some volunteering for the community. This teaches them a lesson. This makes them have to spend some of their time doing good stuff for the community to give back. And then yes, as we have, you know, and then probation, right? So probation is basically also a less severe form of jail where you're kind of put onto this watch list by the government, I would say. And so you get like a warning that says if you do anything bad after you've committed this crime, then we will send you to jail and it will be for a long time. So probation is kind of like an early warning sign that then tells people you better get your act together and start following the law or else something worse will come to you. And so this is what punishments look like, probably. Here's an interesting one that is reserved for the most extreme of extreme crimes, known as the death penalty, also known as capital punishment. Um, so we've all heard of the death penalty, right? I'm sure we have thoughts on this because in some parts of the world, it is seen as a legitimate form of punishment, right? Seen as like if you do something really, really bad, like you murder someone, you should also die, right? But other parts of the world, here in Canada, we actually don't have the death penalty. So instead, we have other forms of punishment, like you're sentenced to jail for life. So you stay in jail for your whole life. So, what do we think about the death penalty? Should we keep the death penalty? Why or why not? Anyone want to start us off? Okay, what about, oh, Hebe, sure, go ahead.
Um, I don't think we should keep the death penalty because like if someone like murders someone else and in response you murder them, that makes you like no better than them. And also people are wrongly convicted like to prison a lot of the time, and prison you can just like let them out and like give them an apology and stuff. But you can't really undo the death penalty if you catch the wrong person.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are 2 points, really good points that you make there. The first is like, well, what does killing the person that killed someone else really do to undo the harm that they've already caused, right? It doesn't, bring that victim back to life just because you've killed this other person. You've just now killed two people in society. The other thing you say is also, I think, quite important is like innocent people get convicted all the time wrongly, and you know, killing them off that's going to be hard for their family, for their friends to see them, especially if they know that they're innocent, right? So better to give them maybe the possibility of still being released in the future by not just giving them the death penalty. That's good. Does anyone have a different view? Does anyone actually support the death penalty and want to like give some explanation?
I think that if a criminal is just too dangerous and like they've already been given a second chance or many different chances, and we can't really like exile them to like somewhere else, I guess the death penalty would be the only option to make sure like society is safe.
Yeah, okay, that's a totally fair argument. Just to say, it's like, look, if everything else has been tried, and these are really truly dangerous criminals who they haven't learned that lesson, maybe they've been to jail already for something really bad. They were released, and now they're like doing more stuff, right? They're a threat to society. They're, for example, a lot of like serial killers have killed not just one, but like tens of people. These types of people in society, is it even worth it for us to kind of put them into jail and just continue spending money and resources to keep them alive? If they're truly, we know they're guilty already, why wouldn't it be easier for us to just give them the death penalty? So for sure, I think this is a valid argument for the death penalty. Okay, cool. Let's get one more opinion and then maybe we'll move on. But I think so far you guys have been giving some really good arguments, and this is quite good. One more idea from someone. Catherine or Bessie, any of you guys want to go? Okay, Catherine, what do you think?
I think we should like keep the death penalty, but maybe like interrogate the person more, or um like we somehow would make sure like the person is not lying just in case they get framed for murder or something bad.
Okay, fair. So kind of going in the middle again, saying like, well, let's make sure that we're not throwing innocent people into the electric chair or through lethal injection. Let's make sure that these people are truly guilty and that the crime they have committed does deserve such a big punishment, right? And I think in theory, this is the idea that most people who support the death penalty, like a lot of states in the United States, still do support the death penalty, kind of have. Um, but there are still flaws, right? Sometimes even the most advanced tools like DNA testing, it can be mistaken. And there have been instances where someone was convicted of a really bad crime and there was like DNA evidence to back it up, only for us to find out years and years later that that DNA evidence is faulty. So we do have to be cautious that, the tools that we're using and the systems, the institutions that we put our faith into to accurately determine someone's guilt is able to do that fairly, right? So for sure, I think that's something for us to consider. Cool. Well, let's now that we kind of understand, here are the punishments, here are the ways in which we try to get people away from doing crime. What is there anything wrong with the current system? Like if we had just implemented the system of only punishing people, just punishing people in society for the crimes they commit, what would be really some really big problems with that kind of system, criminal justice system? Okay, Kibi, what do you think?
If someone like commits a crime and they get sent to prison, like the prison is supposed to be a time for them to rehabilitate back into society. But once you get out of prison, like your crimes go on your permanent record and it becomes really hard for you to find a job and earn money. So you might have to go back to crime, even though you've like changed as a person.
Yeah, that's a great argument. So the term for people who get punished and then continue to commit crimes is known as recidivism, right? And recidivism is actually a really big problem in societies that emphasize punishment. Because oftentimes those punishments don't actually change don't actually, address the core causes of crime. They just make it harder, right? If you are committing crime because you need money, you don't have a job, and suddenly now you are thrown into jail, you suffer in jail, and then when you're released, you also have a criminal record, making it even harder for you to get a job, then you're just going to go back to committing crime, like you said. So that's a really big problem. Anyone else? What are some other issues with the current system? Bessie, what do you think? Do you want to type out your answer in the chat and then maybe we can get back to you? Okay. And then in the meantime, let's hear from Lucas. What do you think?
Um, well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like some there's like some laws that I think the punishment is too great if you like cross it, and while some other laws like you just don't get enough punishment if you commit it.
Okay, I think I see what you're getting at there, which is to say that currently in a lot of places, the punishments for breaking certain laws aren't actually very fair. They're often understated or they're overstated. I think the bigger problem is punishments that are overstated, right? And this has to stem from the idea that in many societies, people look really, really um, poorly on criminals, right? They don't have a lot of sympathy for them, even though they're also humans. And so when you kind of see these people as like really terrible people who are like menaces to society, it generally seems logical to punish them really, really harshly, right? So this is why you'll see in some societies where people who do very, very minor crimes, things like stealing, for example, or theft, right? They get sentenced to like years and years of jail, right? And this is obviously exaggerated, heavily exaggerated punishment. And just punishing people more for these small things is not likely to be effective for all of the reasons we've talked about before, right? So I think that's an important thing to note as well. Thirdly, Bessie says some prisons treat their prisoners really badly and exploit their labor. This is absolutely correct. Um, so again, going back to what we said, in a lot of societies, people don't see prisoners as like even human in a lot of cases. They see them as like terrible people who are like really like harm against society, threats to society, right? And so prisons treat their prisoners really bad. They have poor living conditions. They live in really, really cramped conditions. Maybe they're mistreated and abused by the prison guards. They don't get a lot of opportunities for things like healthcare or mental health support in those prisons. So oftentimes it can be a really draining experience to be a prisoner. And then exploiting them for their labor. So in a lot of countries, this is also a really big problem. This is primarily a problem in private prisons, right? Where people get sent to jail and then they're forced to do hard work. Uh, They're forced to do like manual labor. They don't get paid for this because the logic is like, well, you broke the law, so you're going to get sent to prison. But there are people that profit from all this free unpaid labor. So it's a really big problem as well. Search it up. It's called the prison industrial complex. So yeah, I think you guys have given some really good points about the issues with the current system. So some other things I want to talk about as well. And again, you'll notice that this doesn't just have to do with with the punishment side of things, but also with the enforcement side of things. So discrimination, someone mentioned that discrimination happens a lot in their society, and so we need to improve, right? We need to be more inclusive, be more understanding of each other. But a really big problem in law enforcement is that there is discrimination, and even in like punishments, there's discrimination. So different races are seen as more dangerous or more likely to commit crimes. They're given harsher sentences, or they could be mistreated by the police. So police brutality, as I'm sure all of you guys know, really big issue currently, right? There are many instances where police have discriminated against individuals and, you know, treated and threatened them more harshly because they thought they were more likely to commit certain types of crimes. And then we've talked about harsh punishments, overly harsh punishments, and the lack of reintegration, right? So, once you get out of jail, does society put an effort in to make sure that you can start becoming a normal, well-functioning member of society? Probably not. They don't really give you a lot of support there. So that's a really big issue. So yeah, police brutality. Oops, I've already talked about this, right? But there are many instances in recent news with the killing of George Floyd and then some other African Americans as well in states where police brutality is a really big issue. Okay, so given all that we have learned, let's talk about there's some better ways to address crime. So clearly, just purely punishing these people is not enough. Maybe you can do some stuff to change, to address some of the causes. But in terms of punishing people or, dealing with criminals who have already committed these crimes, what are some better ways to address the ways in which we deal with those criminals? You want to start us off with the thought? So we just spent like 5 minutes identifying the problems with the ways we treat criminals. How can we improve the methods by which we treat these criminals and address their, I guess, their reasons or their motivations for committing crime? Okay, think about that. I'm gonna call on, let's start with Catherine. What do you think?
Um, I think one of the better ways to address crime is to like wait, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay, no worries. Maybe we'll get back to you. Uh, what about Bethany? Do you want to type something in the chat so we can see your response, and then we'll go to Lucas. What do you think?
Um, Perhaps instead of issuing punishments for doing crimes wrong or committing crimes, you can maybe like give rewards or have some incentive to not commit the crimes.
Okay. Uh, so could you give an example of what that might look like? Like, give me an example of a crime and how you could, instead of punishing people for committing that crime, how could you reward them for not doing that?
Maybe like something like speeding. Maybe like instead of punishing them for speeding, you could maybe like reduce their amount of tax you have to pay for your like gas card or something.
I think that's quite an interesting proposal, actually, and maybe that could work, you know? Um, because yeah, like you say, if punishment is really, really bad and doesn't actually address the core issues, well, how else can we maybe reward people and get them to want to follow the law to attain that reward? Well, you know, I think the tax break thing is quite clever. It's you're not just like giving everyone free money necessarily, but you're just reducing the tax savings. I think this is a reasonable proposition. What about specifically the ways in which we treat criminals who have already been convicted, though? Let's be a bit more specific on that. So Hebe, what do you think? How can we change specifically the ways we treat criminals currently to be better?
Um, so there's like lots of problems with how prisons are run and how lots of people who work at the prisons don't like care for the prisoners as people. So I think there should be an emphasis on like mental health and stuff because that's like a big reason of why people like create crimes and maybe don't think very clearly when they make mistakes. And I think like mental health like could like help them like rehabilitate into society and be like well adjusted.
For sure, I think mental health is one of the ways we can have this rehabilitation. I think that rehabilitation point you're making is exactly what I'm trying to get at, right? So for people who are struggling from maybe emotional issues, maybe they do have mental health disorders that cause them to commit this crime. Well, we need to look at ways to address, to directly tackle those issues, right? To make those issues better so that they don't commit crime. We can't just like keep punishing them and expect them to change their behavior. But I think rehabilitation, it can also look like in other ways, right? Changing people's behaviors, right? Through kind of more constructive methods. So not saying we're going to beat you down, we're going to put you in prison continually until you do what's right, but it could look like things like attending these community education classes, right? Where we learn about here are some positive and constructive ways in which you can, try to find a job. Maybe they offer them some like job seeking advice or job finding workshops, right? Maybe they provide them with like some basic classes on here's how you can do these sorts of daily activities that you need and here's how you can get an education, work towards like a college degree or something like that. They have those sorts of programs in prisons as well. Yeah. So all of these are ways that work on seeing these prisoners as humans and trying to build up their other skills, right? Their other abilities so that when they do get out of prison, they're much more equipped to go back into society and go on the right path. So finding a job, going back into their education, whatever it is, right? So it's necessarily about trying to shift their behaviors in a more constructive way. Like someone else said, we can give them rewards. Maybe it's not specifically giving them rewards, but providing like a more patient method by which to teach them, here's how you can stay on the right path, right? So that is the whole idea behind rehabilitation and restorative justice. And this is a system of justice that a lot more people are now actually supporting over simply just punishment. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Here's another case study. You guys, if I encourage you guys, if you're really interested in this subject, you can learn more about it. But prisons in Norway, for example, are like designed completely different than prisons in North America. They're much more open, like you can see in this picture, right? It's a lot nicer. The living conditions are a lot better than American prisons, for example. And that's because they've already been trying to shift towards this idea of rehabilitation and restorative justice, where kind of make the prisoners enjoy kind of the place they're living in, not make it terrible for them, so that again, when they come back into society, they're much more willing, they're much more motivated to work towards positive change. Okay, so this is a really good video by Vox. You guys should watch it if you are interested and you have time. Okay, the final discussion slash debate question we're going to end off on is our current criminal justice system doing enough for rehabilitation? And if not, should we change it? So to wrap things up, taking everything that we've talked about the causes of crime, the different types of punishment, the purpose of the law, all of these things, let's answer this question. So I want each of you guys to give me your opinion, your take on this. We'll start with Bessie. Actually, I forgot. You should probably type the chat just so that we can see it. So then we'll start with TV and then we'll do Lucas.
I don't think the Canadian government specifically is doing enough for especially rehabilitation of criminals. Cause like those prisons in Norway are really nice, but it's not like that for most of the world. And lots of prisons in other countries are like their conditions are a lot worse than that. So I think that's something that like our country could take away from Norway.
I think you've hit it on the nail on the head there with that answer. It's that even developed countries like Canada, we see Canada as like first world country nowadays. But if you kind of look at the ways in which we treat criminals who we see as like so-called like terrible people in society, it's not really this meeting the standards of that first world country, right? So for sure we should change that. Question is how, right? How can we make it better? Lucas, what do you have to add?
I think right now the justice system is not doing enough for rehabilitation. Some ways they could probably change it is maybe make prison like maybe more friendly, or um I guess educate the people who commit the crimes better.
Hmm? So, like how we're kind of referencing back what we discussed earlier, right? The idea of education in prisons. So there are some prisoners who have gone on to actually finish a degree in prison, right? Obviously, they didn't have all the freedoms. They weren't allowed to like go outside the prison, for example, but they had like teachers, for example, like college professors or college educators come in and teach them basic skills, right? Like math, like reading, literature, business. So all of those really important applicable skills that they could then take away when their sentence was over. Right? This is quite important. More support for former criminals and positive reinforcements so criminals don't repeat their crime. I like this, right? Again, I like how you applied what we've discussed in saying like recidivism, right? Remember, this is like the repeated like behavior of past criminals to do more crimes, right? What if we tackled that problem by giving more support to these former criminals, right? Maybe we don't like make it so a criminal record like prevents employers from hiring them, right? Maybe we change the way in which society views criminals. Maybe we offer these past criminals, again, resources like job finding workshops, unemployment insurance, so that they can be able to take the time to find that job and to be able to re-enter into society. These are all really important steps to getting them off that path of crime. So I think you guys all have some really great ideas there. That's really good. I think with that then, that's enough for today's class. And I think we've had a really fruitful and good discussion on crime and punishment. Hopefully you guys have better understanding of these sorts of systems now. Thank you guys all for participating in today's class. It was really enjoyable. I will see you guys next week. Yeah. So you guys are free to leave.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.